Campsite Media.
The first season of the morning show opens in chaos. Mitch Kessler, the longtime co-host of America's most watched morning program, is abruptly fired amid sexual misconduct allegations. His co-host, Alex Levy, is left to steady both a rattled newsroom and her own increasingly fragile career, and to manage the arrival of Bradley Jackson, an ambitious field reporter whose raw, unpolished presence electrifies viewers and upends the delicate backstage ecosystem. What follows is less a story about TV than about power, who wields it, who resists it, and what it costs to tell the truth in an institution built on silence. Across the first season and the next three, rivalries harden into alliances, secrets rupture in public, and the facade of morning TV brightness gives way to something darker, more complicated, and far more human. That's this week on Origin Stories. Welcome back to Origin Stories. Our guest today is Mimi Leder, one of the most accomplished directors and producers working today. Mimi got her start on the long-running TV show LA Law before becoming a director of ER, a post that won her 2 Emmy Awards. Later, she directed big screen thrillers like Deep Impact, and dramas like Pay It Forward. She also directed 10 episodes of The Leftovers on HBO, in my mind, one of the greatest television programs of all time. She's a true legend, in other words. Today, we're talking to Mimi about The Morning Show, the Apple TV series, which is now entering its 4th season, and which has, during its run, covered everything from Me Too to the pandemic to corporate politics. Mimi, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be with you, Matt. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. I have so many questions, but I want to start specifically with the origin of The Morning Show. Now, Brian Stelter had written a book in 2013, thereabouts, called Top of the Morning, I think it was. It wasn't called The Morning Show. Do you think about it as based on, inspired by? What's the right language to use?
Very much inspired by, because it was just really a jumping off point. And it was interesting how it came to me, because I had just finished directing the finale of Luck on HBO that Michael Ellenberg was had shepherded. And, he said, let's go have dinner. And we went to have dinner. He said, I've got this book that I just optioned called Top of the Morning. And, Jen Aniston and Reese Witherspoon, I believe, are attaching. And it's about the behind the scenes of a morning show. And I've always been fascinated by what happens behind the scenes of anything. I was about to go off and do my film on the basis of sex. And I said, yes, I'll do it. Let's do it. I love it. There was no script. There was nothing. And I never sign on to anything where there's no script. But I just felt, the subject matter was very important, significant. And Jen Aniston, Reese Witherspoon are extraordinary actors and people. And I thought this would be a good combination of energy.
What is it about behind the scenes stuff that interests you? I'm in the same boat. I can tell you what I like about it, but what do you like about behind the scenes stories?
Well, everything that happens behind the scenes is not what you expect to have happen. And I guess we have expectations about what happens, but it's not what happens. And, you see people at their rawest. You see them in their most fragile, in their most vulnerable, in their most awful. In designing the pilot, I really wanted it to have that feeling of contrast and complexity. And, on air, very bright, everything is beautiful. You go behind the curtain, people are scrambling, no one knows what they're doing. They're scrambling for the story. Everything is on the run. It's chaos. And on air, it's calm. And so I wanted to show that contrast in lighting, in the colors we chose. That's what I enjoy about it. I enjoy the unexpected, the messiness.
Especially here, the dichotomy is so distinct here, where you have people who are at a certain level of national news. They're beautiful people, they're nice to look at, they're presenting a version of themselves that is being beamed into people's living rooms where they're making coffee and having breakfast with these people. And we're encouraged to think of them. This is what's so interesting about this show and also morning TV in general. It's like these are friends, right? Like these are people you want to hang out with. But of
Yeah.
course, that's a version of them. It's partly true, partly not. But there's a real dichotomy there, right?
Yeah. You wake up with them, they're your friends, you're brushing your teeth with them, you're drinking your coffee, you're getting dressed, and you know, you have faith in them. They're the calming effect on what life is supposed to be. And then of course behind the scenes their lives are, if not more so, um, messed up, screwed up, troublesome than your own. And you don't see that part, but that's the exciting part of the show. You see the absolute madness of what it takes to put on a show. You see that these people are just like you. They're going through a divorce. They're their children are complicated. Just life. And they're as complicated as you, if not more so. And that's what's really fun about doing the show, is seeing all that.
I don't think you're alone in feeling the fascination too. I remember more recently there was a behind the scenes love affair, in the past couple of years and I remember I think I was in New York at the time, and just every day on the front of the post was updates about this because I suspect it's for the same reason, right? It's like this is what they're actually like, and being able to
Yes.
see a sliver of this is just
It's
titillating. I mean, there's no
it
other word
is.
for it.
It
Yeah.
Yeah, it is titillating. It's in some ways it's comforting that they're human. They're fucked
Yeah.
up just like
Yeah.
everyone else. They're
Yeah.
just trying to get through it, trying to find love, trying to get through the day.
I
In
was
in
thinking,
in with the news, with such news, that's just bombarding us and knocking us down, and we just need to be raised up.
yeah, but that's what's so interesting too. I was thinking about the timing for this. We live now in this environment where news really does feel like an assault every time I turn on NPR or turn on CNN or whatever. It just feels like I'm being punched in the face. This preceded it a little. Like this is certainly Brian's book was from an era where it wasn't so dire. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this. What if you'd started to make the show now in this environment? It would be a different show, right? Like because cable news and morning shows are
Yeah.
different now.
Yeah. Well, I think the show certainly has evolved over the years. I mean, we started with the Me Too movement. And if you look at that then, 2019 when we aired, and you look at today, it was shocking in that what has really changed since then? This has been going on for so long for these women. And so, yes, a lot has changed, but nothing really has changed. It's just gotten worse. But our show has definitely evolved in terms of it's a morning show, but the things we are dealing with on the show, not really morning show material, journalists under threats, deep fakes,
Mhm.
you know, um, news, conspiracy theories, corruption, power. It's a very different show than when we started, for sure.
I was reading about the preparation for morning show and all these sort
Yeah.
of how much thinking you did about what this world looked like. With a morning show, you know what these sets look like in general. Did you visit one, by the way? Did you ever go on any of the
Yes,
sets?
we went to the John Pano, the production designer of the first season, and I went to the Today Show, and we went to the Good Morning America. And Good Morning America, all the wires are in the ceiling, and so our sets have all the wires in the ceilings. And yes, I shot so many pictures. And Pano brought it to life, and then Nelson Coates took over in the second season through the fourth. And um, it was fantastic. These rooms were so tiny. And I'm going, you can't build these rooms this small. I have to get a camera in here and have to shoot it. And, without hopefully pulling too many walls. The sets are really beautiful. They're really incredible. Built this glass apartment for Jen, sitting surrounded by glass, everyone looking at you and you're looking out. And, I did do a mood board and I keep it in my office at the morning show. And after the pilot, I went, it looks like the mood board. I wanted to shoot these close ups of women like men are shot. And of course, the lady's like, well, what are you doing? You're in my face, and Mimi, are you sure about this? And anyway, I would get as close as I could because I wanted to get really in their faces. I wanted to, look into their eyes. And then I wanted to do these big wide shots of, from big wide to bam into your face. I took a lot of inspiration from just great filmmakers, from broadcast news to The Insider, a lot of Michael Mann imagery, Mulholland Drive. I didn't even think about it too much, but I realized that Naomi Watts is on my mood board a lot, her eyes. And I'd never even told her this. There's a lot of images of Network on my um, mood board. Just really great shots.
I find this fascinating because I also wonder, how do you prevent inspiration like this, visual inspiration, from leaking too much into what you're doing? In other words, when I read right before I sit down to write, if I'm not careful, I will parrot the style that I read before. So if you've got a mood board going on and you're like,
Mhm.
these are all my inspirations, but you still want it to be yours,
Yeah, it becomes
what's
yours.
the alchemy there?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely becomes something else. It's just sort of a visual guide of images that um, how you want to shoot the newsroom. So when I visited the real newsrooms, I did a lot of, may I take pictures? And I took lots of pictures. And a lot of the pictures I took are images you see in the show. You know, a lot of reflections in glass, uh, when we're in the control room. It becomes your own voice. Like when you're writing, it becomes yours. You may take inspiration from a story, but it certainly isn't that story and
Yeah.
doesn't look like it or feel like it. It just it's just a visual guide.
I think that the people who are best at a given creative craft tend to be the people who consume a lot of that. I think it's a truism, but it's truism for a reason, that if you talk to a novelist, chances are they read like 78 novels a year and sort of
Wow.
know what has been done and what hasn't been done and what they want to steal from
Sure.
a little. And it sounds like you're the same way. I mean, you are deeply steeped, even from a family perspective, in the craft of film.
Hey, we all borrow a little bit from the people we admire, from images we love. I think it's, when I do a shot that I know is clearly something that somebody else has done in another movie, it's more to me like I'm paying homage to you for creating that feeling, and it's become something else when you're doing it, and it's not the same thing.
Tell me about the sequence. You shoot all the episodes. In other words, I think this one, what's the phrase? Went straight to series, right? You did, or did you make a
Yes.
pilot before you made the rest of the show?
No, made a pilot and shot the series. You know when it's good. You know when it's not good. You know when it's not working. It's very interesting, and I felt that it was working. You have the such a combination of great actors and different styles of acting put together. And, Jen and Reese are funny as hell. They can do any kind of comedy, and they can do any kind of drama. They can have you on the floor weeping and at the same time laughing. Um, they are, and just all of them: Billy Crudup, Nestor, Carbonell, Karen Pittman. My God, they're all extraordinary. Billy Crudup is like, I am so lucky. I get to go to work and tell stories with such, uh, with actors who have such humanity and authenticity. And it's really, I am so grateful, actually.
I want to ask you first, before you tell me that, you juggle a lot of projects at once. I was looking at IMDb. Give us your advice for switching tracks between projects. Because we've had on people who are like, I can only do one thing at once. And then other people have been like, no, I like the challenge of switching gears.
I can do a lot of things at once, but when I'm in it and shooting and directing, I really can only do one thing at a time. And that is, the morning show or any television show that has, 10 episodes. It's like making a 10-hour movie. So you're completely immersed. And, you juggle your life, your family. I have a family, I have a husband, kids, grandkids, you just I just try. I don't know. I'm not great at all of it, but I try and do my best. It takes a village. I certainly have a big support system.
You're identifying something really interesting where there's different phases to these projects. So something might be in development and you don't actually have to be on a set.
Yeah,
Maybe it's just the early scripts, so you can juggle that kind of work. It's things go into production and the shooting starts. That's when you have to be locked in.
yeah, you're totally locked in, and everybody knows that. When I had my daughter Hannah is when I got my break, my first job. And I never intended it to be that way. That was the time when I was supposed to be, you know, nursing for a year, doing it the way I wanted to do it. And then I got my first job, and you just have to make these many, many multiple decisions as a director and a producer and as a
Decisions
woman.
that men don't necessarily have to make in the
Yeah,
same way.
that's true. Men don't nurse. Yeah, it was really quite a time.
When you look back at the beginning of your career, are there mentors that helped you understand what this takes emotionally, intellectually, creatively?
It's a really good question. I don't think anybody sat me down and told me what the toll might be. I grew up in a filmmaking family. My father was an ultra low budget feature filmmaker from the 60s to the 90s, and we used to make these B movies. And I mean, he made them. He made 23, and we worked on them. And it was so much fun. There were always kids, and I was one of them, in the house, all these young kids. And we were all a band of filmmakers stealing shots in the streets, no permits, running around. And so the toll of that was just one big, great big family of reward. And no one ever sat me down and said, well, it's going to be really hard. It's going to be this. It was hard trying to get my foot in the door. It was very hard trying to become a filmmaker. Um, it's easier today. There was only a handful of us women making films. Catherine Bigelow led the charge. There was me, Martha Coolidge, Jane Champion. I made a short film. Um, um, I was offered a job. I was fired before I ever did it. There was many, many mountains to climb. John Wells and John Sacred Young championed me hired me. I had been directing about a year, but to come on to China Beach, which should have been a cable show, or would be today, about women in Vietnam with Dana Delaney and Mark Helgenberger. So anyway, they really shepherded me, and there was Sherry Lansing on Deep Impact. Steven Spielberg was my mentor. He produced ER. One day I was doing a 6-page oneer, And it was quite something for its time on ER. And Stephen was watching me do this shot. I didn't even know he was there. He was just, my DP came up and whispered in my ear and said, "Hey, Spielberg's in the corner watching you." And I went, "What? Really? Huh?" And then he called me into his office and said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I want to make Schindler's List. I want to do what you do." And he was very lovely and very supportive and hired me to do The Peacemaker, the first DreamWorks movie.
Might be an uncomfortable question, but pretend you are not yourself and you're looking at yourself from some omniscient third person point of view. What do you think that people saw in you back then? What do you think they see in you now in terms of the talents that are unique to you? What are you most proud of in terms of your abilities?
Yeah, well, I wanted to be a cinematographer at one point in my life. And I went to AFI when I was 21. And I learned everything I could about the camera. And I think that is really one of my strengths, in that I'm a very visual director, and I'm very much of an actor's director, because I always approach a scene through the character's point of view. And in that point of view, I also have my visual picture of how I want to tell the story. And so I feel like I'm pretty, if I was looking up and going, "What's she got?" And I think I have a very strong story sense. And I really like to work from an authentic place. And I like to go deep with imagery and with character. I love it. I love to experiment. I love to explore. I don't like to rehearse too much. I like to get it on camera on the day. I like talking about it, but not intellectualizing about it. I just love telling stories through pretty pictures.
But you touched on something really interesting there, which is listening to you talk about this. It makes me realize that the way the creative mind works in film and TV is really different, which seems like an obvious thing to say, than someone who's working in print or in audio, because you are always visualizing. You have some muscle or some part of your brain that is able to visualize how you want something to look, which must be akin to a painter or a visual artist. It feels like a different, I don't know, maybe you disagree, but it feels like a slightly different skill set than that of being a novelist, let's say.
But a novelist, often visualizes what they have enough room. That's their job. I actually feel, to really set up the imagery, as opposed to a screenwriter who is not really directing on the page, shouldn't be, is telling the story. When I did The Leftovers, my first episode of that, it was the first scene was a stoning of Gladys. And I know your people may not have seen that, but I've never seen a stoning. And I was like, "Oh shit, fuck, how am I gonna shoot this? I can't kill the actress. I can't hurt her. I've got to figure this out. And what's it like when you put a bag over your head and you're dragged through the forest and plopped up against a tree?" And, so I visualized the whole thing, then went to work as to how to do it, you know, all handheld, how, make a full size dummy of the actress so I could actually shoot her, and I could actually throw rocks at a real dummy, or a real, life size image of her in wide shots. It takes a lot of layers to make things look really simple and easy. You know, like I had these rocks made out of styrofoam, and we'd throw them at the actor, but it was still hurting the actor. So I said, "Okay, forget the rocks." I mean, I only used the rocks on the dummy, and I put CGI rocks in where I needed to. And then when I wanted to shoot her and her pain and her agony and her death, I I just would call it out, "Bam!" and she'd throw her head back, and plead. And this is a character that was part of a cult who didn't speak. um, The Guilty Remnant. And this is the first time she's spoken in a year when she pleads for her life.
We had
Yeah,
this a different TV person on who said a showrunner's like being God. You say, let there be flying ships, and then there are flying ships. But there's also something like amazingly childlike in the good way about childlike. I'm thinking about my young daughters playing with toys and like being able to
right.
envision an entire world that kind of gets scrubbed out of some people as they get older, but it did not get scrubbed out of you. You're still able to visualize all of that.
Yeah. I have a 4-year-old grandson, and I play with him often and watch him uh, create all this stuff in his mind, and it is like it's so great. And I guess what you just said is very true of me. I'm still a child, or I still think like a child. I still feel like a child. I feel like I'm 25 years old, and and I hope I always feel this way, or at least what's left. I think curiosity is something a filmmaker needs to have, and a child needs to be encouraged to continue to have.
So I have a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old, but I do like I think about
Amazing.
this a lot recently because I do worry that something happens at some age where people they stop pretending. The 6-year-old still pretends all the time. She's happy to pretend and make whole worlds in her head. And the
Yeah.
10-year-old has gotten to the point where it's not maybe not socially acceptable or it's not what her friends are doing. And so you sort of distance yourself from it over time. But that's one of the realizations I've had doing this show and getting to talk to people like you. It's like the people who are really good at this kind of thing, it doesn't go away. They're still always creating and visualizing and thinking, which is reassuring.
Yeah. And I think filmmakers, that's what filmmakers do, and writers, you sit and you create and you imagine what it could be, what does it feel like? And yeah, that is the process. It's just a lot of dreaming, a lot of musing, and then the reality hits. Okay, here's your budget. You got to shoot it in 2 days. You got to shoot it in 3 days. But yeah, dreaming. I'm so lucky. I get to play.
Do you draw any of these scenes ever, or are they just in your head, or do they ever get onto paper in any sort of visual way?
Yeah, the only time I do storyboards is when I have to shoot an action sequence, like in the opening of this season on the morning show. There's an action sequence. I had to shoot that also in a very short period of time of 9 hours, and it was very involved. And it's the only way to get through um, shooting something quickly and easily explaining it to people. In the Peacemaker, I did storyboards um, because it was a lot of set pieces. But I don't do any storyboards for anything else.
It feels like a lot of people learn either to trust themselves or they learn from experience when they're doing something like, oh no, this is wrong. Like I know it's wrong because I'm remembering X, Y, and Z. Right? Like it doesn't come instantly that you know
It's
when
a
something's
muscle.
right or wrong.
Obviously, experience is everything in that it gives you the confidence that you don't have when you're younger. I think it's a combo of both. I do think it's a muscle. I do think it's an instinct. Something inside you goes, no, 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 that's not working. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't. Let's try this. Let's do this. And it's certainly um, something that you explore on film. And, it's really a process because something that may work on set doesn't always work editorially or become something completely different than you imagined it to be. And, or even better than you thought it would be, it's very interesting. You make the movie 3 times, you write it, you direct it, and then you edit it, and you're remaking it every single time.
How do you give feedback, Mimi, to people like editors, to people on set? I'm not thinking of actors, I'm thinking of people who are behind the camera or working alongside you. When something's not working and you know it's not working, how do you handle that?
Your editor does their cut, and then you give notes. It could be anything from let's take a different approach to this scene. let's start it close. Let's start it really wide. Let's start it in blackness. Let's start it in the darkness. Let's start it with, it's just, you mold, you shape, you sculpt. And the same thing on set, if a scene is not working, like, or how should this scene be shot? So there was a scene that something really intense happened. I said, let's shoot it handheld, but let's not shoot it crazy. Let's not, where you can't like focus, but let's give it some edge. And, that's how you create a scene. If something's not working, maybe the lens is not the right lens. Change lenses. Let's get it this way. Let's lower the camera. It's a dance, uh, with what the actor is giving and doing, and what you're doing with your lens to help tell that story. So it's a dance. I always feel like I'm dancing with the camera and my actors. Sometimes it's a slow dance, and sometimes it's, let's make this a fast dance. let's go nuts. Let's go crazy.
You are touching on something that I wanted to ask you, which has to do with tone of the show and the themes. You were mentioning an intense scene where you ended up using a handheld camera. I don't want to spoil anything, but I think I can say that you deal with some really intense stuff in the first season, on a lot of different levels. But the tone of the show is not dismal. Like, it's not like you are about to get a lesson. So, how do you balance serious themes with you want people to be entertained, right? They're watching a
Yeah.
show that is entertainment.
Yeah. Well, that you just hit on it. That was my biggest fear in directing the pilot, is keeping the levity, finding the humor and the drama, and walking that line between, finding that tone where you can laugh and be terrified all at the same time. Something horrible has happened, but you're still laughing here and there at the ridiculousness of everything that's going on. I mean, it was a very difficult tone to hit, but doing the pilot, it was, in the first season, was a real, high wire act in trying to achieve it. And I think we did.
I think you did too.
And
I really do.
Thank you.
How will you know when you're done with the morning show? Not when the morning show is done, but how will you know when you're done with it?
I think this next season will probably be my last one, because after this next season, I'm going to go make a film about my family, about my father, and the world of low budget filmmaking in the 80s. And I'm going to do it on a really low budget, like he did. Not as low as he, but those were the days. But I know that's where I'm going toward. I think I've given a lot to the show, and I birthed it, and I want to finish it. And I birthed it with a lot of people. You don't birth it by yourself. But I do feel it is my baby. Do you know what I mean? It's hard to let go of your
I know
baby.
exactly what you mean. So the competing interests are like, you made this thing, you love it, and I don't think you'd probably want to see it go to someone that you don't trust or like, but there must be a point where you're like, wow, I have lived with these people, these characters for so long.
Yeah. That's coming. It's coming. And because I'm super excited about season 4. I feel it's a great season, and it's a real roller coaster. It's going to take you places, and then season 5 is going to be really, really great as well. And I think, there's just so much time in your life, and I have after the morning show, I have a lot of stories I want to tell, and I got a lot to do. Yeah.
Will you come back to talk about the project about your dad
Oh my
once that
God.
gets going?
I will. It's called I Dismember Papa. He made this one movie called I Dismember Mama. He used to make all these slasher films. And so this is what it's called. And it's, kind of, the obligatory, it's kind of like Our Little Miss Sunshine meets Day for Night, if I could be so bold to say that. And it's really fun. It's about the family you make when you make a movie and actually making it with your family. Because we are a merry band of filmmakers. And, you know, just saying that, the morning show has become my family. It's been a great ride. And I think people are going to dig the show, and I think they're going to enjoy it.
Last question for you. What do your
Yeah.
grandkids think you do? When you sit down and talk to your little tiny grandkids, what do they understand what it is that you do?
Not real. I mean, my 4-year-old is like, knows I'm an artist. And he also is an artist. He says, I'm an artist. I said, I know. Yes, you are a beautiful artist. And so he doesn't know what I do. No. It was funny. I got this award of Women in Film Award, the Dorothy Arzner Award. Like, my daughter was, I think, 8 or 9. And my husband took her, and she was there. And I think it was like the first time she realized that I was getting a trophy for something I had done for doing art. Anyway, it's really interesting when they start to realize what you do.
And gratifying.
And it is. It's like I have 2 other grandchildren from my husband's first marriage, and I one is 12 and one is 10, Jasmine and Malcolm. And one of them said to me, they went, "You're famous, right?" I go, "Nah, I'm not famous. I'm just a filmmaker. I just tell stories." They go, "But you're famous." No, not famous. It's like, what does that even mean? But it's interesting from a kid's point of view.
I've really enjoyed this, Mimi. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was
Thank you
lovely
so
talking
much
to you.
for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah. It was fun. You're wonderful.